Hello my dear shining stars, how are you all doing? Aprajita is back here again with a new chapter for you by Aarchi's series Heaven's Publishing House, and the chapter says Mighty Moves, class 6, chapter number 11. So what's there in it? Let's move. We usually play games. Everybody is fond of playing games, and we play games with our friends. Sometimes we have unusual playmates. Look at these children from around the world with their unique playmates. Which of these would you prefer to play with? Look, usually we play normal games, outdoor games, indoor games. Those are the normal games. But many a times we have a different playmate for us, which is very unusual. See here. What's this? A dolphin. This girl is playing with a dolphin. Here the boy is playing chess with his grandfather. Horse riding. Playmate is horse. Here it's owl. A child is playing with a robot. Now she has a very unusual playmate, snakes. So these are some different playmates. So what would you like to choose to play with? It's all up to you. Whatever you like to play with, you have to write this. Toys are an integral part of one's childhood. What kind of toys do you play with? Write their names here. Each and every child has a different liking for different toys. So whichever toy you like to play with, just write it down here. Moving ahead, about this lesson. What does this lesson tell about? This lesson is about Sisa, the scholarly sage. Sage is the person with the wisdom. And a powerful king, Shriram. The king was fond of playing chess. The king liked to play chess very much. When he discovered that the game was invented by Sisa, he commanded his courtiers to call that old man in the court. He wanted to see who is this person who has created such a beautiful game. So now let's see what's inside this chapter, how Sisa is called in the court and what all the king talks about. The powerful King Shriram talks to him. We often feel that someone is powerful when they display physical strength. When somebody shows his physical strength, we feel that yes, he is the most powerful person. However, physical powers is superficial and can diminish with age and time. The real strength of a person's character lies in his wisdom. Now what happens? This power, the physical power, when we grow as we age, this power starts going down. The graph of this power starts going down along with the age. But the power of wisdom always remains with a man till his death. Read this story to discover how wisdom overpowers physical strength. How this wisdom has overpowered the physical strength we'll see in this story. There lived in ancient India a scholarly sage and innovative teacher called Sisa, the inventor of chess. Sisa was the person who invented chess, and he was a very scholarly sage. He was a person full of wisdom. Everyone in the kingdom enjoyed playing chess, including Shriram, the king. One morning, as the king moved one of the glided pieces of his marble chessboard, he asked, who invented this remarkable game? The king Shriram was very fond of playing chess, and one morning when he was playing chess, he asked his courtiers that who invented this remarkable game, this awesome game chess? One of your own subjects, sir, replied a courtier, a wise man by the name of Sisa. Now he says, there is a wise man named Caesar who has invented this chess. I must reward this man, request him to come to the court, he commanded. He told his courtiers that please call this man in the court, I want to give him some reward. At once, a retinue of soldiers and courtiers sped off to Caesar's village, and the very next morning he entered the king's court, dressed in well-worn clothes. Now what happened? As the king has ordered, so all the courtiers, all the soldiers at once moved to Caesar's village to bring him to the court. Looking at his simple demeanor, the king asked in surprise, "You invented this game?" He saw a very well-dressed person in front of him and he asked him, "Is that you who has invented this game?" Caesar smiled and nodded. The king looked at the sage and asked, "Ask for anything you desire and it shall be yours." Now the king was very happy and he said, Caesar, that okay, I want to give you some reward. You ask whatever you want and I'll give that to you. Caesar thought hard. His silence troubled the king. "Do not hesitate," he said. "You have to only tell me what's your desire and I shall give it to you." Now Caesar just started thinking what to ask for, and his silence was troubling the king. He said, "Okay, go ahead. Tell me what you want. I am there to give everything to you." "Generous king," said Caesar, "I am a simple sage and my needs too are simple. I ask only for this, some grain from your granary." Now, granary is a place where all the grains are kept, stored. So he said, Caesar said, "It's very kind of you, my king, but I am a very simple person. I don't require anything. I just require some grain from your granary." "Grain?" said the king in surprise. "Surely, do you want something else?" He said, "Grain? You just want grain. I am rewarding you with anything, but you just want grain." He said, if you want something else, please tell." "Grains of wheat are all that I want," replied Caesar gently, "as it is the power of my chessboard that brought me here. I ask that you give me grains of wheat in exchange for the squares on your chessboard." Now see what he has asked for. He asked for some grains, and how many squares are there in the chessboard? I want the grains according to those squares. Per square I want grains. For the first square I would like 2 grains of wheat. For the second I would like 2 multiplied by itself, means 2 for first one, then multiply 2 by 2, 2 to the 4, okay, which is 4 grains of wheat. For the third, 2 must be multiplied by itself thrice, and for the fourth, 2 must be multiplied itself by 4 times. So 2 to the 4, 4 to the 8, 8 to the 16, like this, and so on until the 64th square. "Is that all? Are you sure?" Now the king is very surprised. The demand which Caesar made was a very weird demand and a very simple one also for the king. The king said, "Oh, he wants just grain." "I am certain," said Caesar. He said, "I am sure and certain. I want this only. The grains of wheat you give me will follow the sequence 2, 4, 6, 2, 4, 8, 16 and so on. Like 2 to the 4, 4 to the 8, 8 to the 16. Like this it will go on till the 64th square of the chessboard. There are 64 squares in a chessboard. If this is what you wish, consider it given." He said, "Okay, given." The king said, "I took you for a wise man, but now I wonder, take your sack of grain and you may return to your village. Now the king said, I was wondering that you are a very wise man. You would ask for something very good, very big, but you just want grain. Okay, take the sack of your grain and move to your village. Go back to your village. See, I am an old man, sir, said Sisa. Even a small sack of grain would be too heavy for me to carry. May I ask that you send this grain to my village? He said, King, I am a very old man and a bag of grain will also be very heavy for me to carry. So please kindly, can you send the grain, the sack of grain to my village? Of course, said the king. Your grain will reach you by sunset. Caesar smiled and left. King said, okay, fine. You move, you go to your village and till sunset, the sack of grain will reach you. The king spent the rest of the day busy with the affairs of his kingdom, leaving the prime minister to see to Caesar's reward. Now he said his prime minister, okay, you start packing his reward and I am busy with some other affairs of the kingdom. When the sun had almost set, the king realized that the prime minister had still not returned from the granary and summoned him. Now when he had done all his work, the king, he realized that the prime minister has still not come back from the granary. He has not reported me that whether he has sent the sack of grain to Caesar or not. The prime minister walked up to the throne a few minutes later and stood nervously looking at the floor. When somebody is nervous, how they stand like this. And the prime minister was standing like this in front of the king. Has that foolish sage's sack of grain been sent to him yet? The king asked the prime minister, have you sent that sack of grain to that foolish sage Caesar? So what he said, the king asked this. The prime minister shook his head slowly, refusing to meet the king's eye. Now, as he was standing like this, he refused to look into the king's eye. He shook his head. No. Why? The king was very surprised. Asked the king, exasperated. He was like, why? He was very surprised. He asked very exasperated. We are still counting the grains, Your Highness. The Prime Minister said, Your Highness, we are still counting the grains. Still counting the grains? Thundered the king, getting angrier. Now the king was more angry. What are you saying? You are counting the grains. What do you mean? If I don't send the sack, I'll be breaking my word for the first time. He said, if the sack doesn't reach Caesar's village on time, I would be breaking my word. I have given him the word that it would reach you till sunset. The Prime Minister, raising his eyes, at last said, it is the sage's cleverness that may force you to reconsider your decision. Now what the Prime Minister says, Your Highness, the sage has very cleverly given a calculation of grains and you have to reconsider your decision after listening to the calculation. The king shouted, I never reconsider. The king said, once I gave a word, I have given a word. I will never reconsider it again. Get someone who is good at counting to help you and make sure the reward is dispensed by sunset tomorrow. Now he said, I never ever reconsider my decisions. The decision which I have given is the final one, and please keep somebody who is good in counting. Please keep somebody for your help and do this work, complete this work by sunset tomorrow. I will do my best, sir, said the Prime Minister. The next evening, the king asked for the Prime Minister again. The next evening again he asked for Prime Minister. Where is the Prime Minister? Instead, the royal astronomer, who was known for his skill with numbers, and calculation met him. The king called the astronomer, who was very good in numbers, in counting and all, in calculation and all. The astronomer came and he said, "Your Highness, I request your permission to speak." He said, "Your Highness, I would like to say something with your permission." "What is that blundering fool doing?" yelled the king. The king again started shouting in anger. "What is that fool Prime Minister doing?" The astronomer calmly suggested, "Why don't we sit down and talk it over?" He continued quickly, "You do not have enough grain in your granary or enough money in your treasury to buy the amount of grain that you have promised to give him." Now the astronomer says that, "Your Highness, the amount of grain which has been asked by Caesar, you don't have that much of grain in your granary, and moreover you don't have that much of treasure in your treasury to purchase more grain." "That's impossible," hissed the king. He was so angry, he started shouting like anything. "That's impossible." "Let me show you why," said the astronomer. The astronomer said, "Your Highness, let me show you how the calculation goes." What a flourish! He wrote down the numbers from 1 to 64. Why 1 to 64? Because there are 64 squares on the chessboard. In a long column on the left of a scroll. On the left of a paper, a scroll of paper, he wrote the numbers 1 to 64. For the first square on the chessboard, we owe Caesar just 2 grains of wheat. For the first square, he said 2 grains. For the second, 2 is multiplied by itself, means 2 to the 4, which is 4 grains of wheat, and so on until 64th square. "So what?" said the king. "We must then add up all the wheat grains we get from the sequence of 2 from the first till final square." How long does it take? For the king, it was a very simple task. He thought that, yes, keep on multiplying 2, 2, 2, 2 and then add on everything and you will come to know how much grain has to be sent. How long does it take? It doesn't take any time. "Your Highness," said the royal astronomer, "I have no doubt that you will be able to work it out on your own. Why don't you tell us what the final figure is?" Now, the royal astronomer asked the king, Sherry, that, "Your Highness, I know you are very well capable of finding out the figure. So why don't you tell us how much grain has to be sent? What is the final figure of the grain?" "Sure," said the king, "I can do it in my head." He said, "Oh, I need not have any paper and all. I can do everything in my head. I can do the calculations there." He sat still for a few minutes, absorbed in calculation. He started thinking, he started calculating. "Give me that scroll, would you please?" Now, he asked for the scroll from the astronomer. He said after a while, "I am losing track of it in my head with all those 2's. But it will be easier on paper." He said, after calculating for a few minutes, he said, "Oh, I am losing the track. So please give me the scroll of paper. It will be easy to do on that." The royal astronomer handed him the scroll and slipped away quietly. He went away, giving the scroll to the king. The king spent the night working out the problem. As the sun rose the next morning, the king summoned the prime minister. Now, the whole night the king was busy in calculating the grains, the total amount of grains. And in the morning he called his prime minister. The prime minister walked in, looking like a man who had not slept in a while. The prime minister came and he was like, when the king saw him, it was looking like he had not had a sleep for a single minute. "I spent the night working it out thyself, said the king. I know now why you were unable to fulfill my foolish promise. Now the king says, the whole night I was busy in calculating the grains, and now I have come to know that why you were not able to take out the whatever foolish promise I had done, why you were not able to fulfill that. For the 64th square alone, we owe him about this much of grain, because the figure was 18446744073. It just went off in millions, billions, trillions of grains just on 64th square. So just imagine if they are going to add on everything, what amount would come out. The royal architect told me that a cubic meter of wheat contains about 15 lakh grains. I have been trying to imagine how large a granary could hold the amount of grain that Caesar requested. Now the king has come to know the cleverness of the sage. Why Caesar had asked for the grain? Because the amount which was coming out, a granary could not hold that amount of grain in it. The Prime Minister nodded wearily. If all the land on the earth was sown with wheat, sir, it would still not yield the grain we have promised, he said softly. He said, sir, if also on the earth all the land is being filled with wheat, with the grains, then also we will not be able to fulfill our promise which we had done with Caesar. We will not be able to give him that amount of grain. See the cleverness of the sage. King Shahram smiled. Yes, yes, I know, he said. You deserve some sleep, my good man. But before that, make sure you request that Caesar be brought to court again. He said to the Prime Minister, okay, now my good man, you please go to sleep. You have worked the whole night, the whole day for calculating this. Now I have understood why you were facing this problem. But please, before going to sleep, just make sure that Caesar comes tomorrow again in the court. The next day when Caesar arrived, the king prostrated himself before the sage. You have humbled me, he said. There is not enough grain in all the world to satisfy your request. He said, very humbly he said, that you have on the earth, on this whole earth, there is no such thing which can satisfy your request, because the calculation which you have given us, it comes out to such a large number that we are not able to fulfill your wish. I don't need your grain, he said. What Caesar said? Sir, your highness, I don't need your grain, but there are many in your kingdom who do. Giving brings more joy and contentment than wealth and riches. Then the king bowed his head, and Caesar blessed him and departed. What Caesar said? Your highness, I don't need your grain, but there are many people in your kingdom who require this, who are very poor, who need this grain. So please, giving, when you give something to others, it brings you more joy, more peace in your heart, that you have done something good for others. So please, they are the person who are to be given. Now the king bowed his head, and Caesar blessed him, and he went away. Now, we all know that playing games, different types of games, and developing our stamina, it improves our health. So we should play games, we should exercise, it's good for our body, and we should always take care that smartness is good. Smartness is good, but along with the smartness, along with your physical smartness, your physical strength, the wisdom has to be there. Without wisdom, you cannot prove your physical smartness also. Your physical health will never bring you that popularity which your wisdom brings. Wisdom, physical strength along with the wisdom can give you new heights. Now, let's start with the exercise. Read and write. Take the correct answer. The game of chess was invented by, as we all have read, the game of chess was invented by Caesar. The king wanted the wise man to come to his court because he wanted to reward him. The king was very happy. What did Caesar want from the king? Caesar didn't want anything, he just wanted wheat grains. Answer the following questions. Why was the king surprised on seeing Caesar? The king wanted to know about who has invented the game of chess, and when he saw Caesar in front of him in a very well dressed, well worn clothes and a very simple man in front of him, he was very surprised that this man has invented this game. He thought that somebody in a very royal look, he would find some person in a very royal look, but he found Caesar in a very simple worn clothes. The king had to give the sage grains based on a certain sequence. Explain the calculation. What was the calculation which Caesar gave? The calculation was starting from the first square of the chess board, 2 grains for the first square, then multiplied by 2, again for the second square, then again multiplied by 2. The 2's had to be multiplied to the number coming out. So this was the way the grain was asked. Why did the king ask the royal astronomer for the scroll of paper? The king asked the astronomer for the scroll of paper because when he was calculating this calculation in his mind, he was getting out of track. He was not able to keep the track of the calculation. So he said it would be better if I write it down and then solve it, then do the calculations. Next is, what problem did the Prime Minister point out to the king regarding the reward? What was the problem? The Prime Minister pointed out the king that, Your Highness, the reward which you have promised Caesar is, you have to reconsider it, because the problem is we don't have so much of grain in our granary which Caesar has asked for. Now, next section is think and answer the questions. Why did a simple request turn out to be such a difficult calculation? Discuss the magic of numbers in this context. It was just a simple request that I need, Caesar had made a simple request that I need some grains in reward. And why it turned out to be such a difficult calculation? Because it had to be multiplied with the magic of numbers. It was just a magic of numbers. 2 grains turned out to be millions, billions, trillions, so much of grain that which could not be fulfilled by the king also. The granary also didn't have that much of grains inside it. So this was just a magic of 2's. Don't judge a book by its cover. Explain this proverb with reference to the story. Look, it said that don't judge a book by its cover. If the cover is not good, don't think that the content inside it will not also, the content is also not good. Maybe the book has a simple cover, but inside it has very interesting thing. Same way, when the king met Caesar, he saw he's a very simple person. How he could have invented this game of chess? And when he heard for the reward, when he asked for the reward that okay, I want to reward you, and he asked for the grains, he said, look, I thought he is a person of wisdom and he is just asking for grains in reward. So, don't judge anybody with the cover of the book. The cover of the book may be simple, but inside it may be very interesting, very good, very beautiful things. Same way, Caesar was a very simple person, but he asked for such a reward which the king could not fulfill. The king was a powerful man while Caesar was a wise man. According to you, which quality is more important, power or wisdom? Why? See, the king was very powerful, physically he was very powerful, and Caesar had wisdom. Both the things are necessary. Both the things are necessary in our life. If we have power and wisdom both, then a person can do anything. Just power, just having power. The king had power and he just thought, okay, he has just asked for grain. He was not at all aware of the calculation which Caesar had given. And Caesar was wise enough to ask for that simple reward, which was simple in listening. While the king heard it and he said, okay, it's very simple reward. I can just give it like this only. But he was so wise, Caesar was so wise, his wisdom worked. His wisdom worked and he helped the people of whole kingdom. He said, I don't want those grains. I just wanted to make you aware that your grains should go out in the kingdom to help the poor people who are there who need these grains more. So, power and wisdom both are necessary in our lives. So, children, I hope you have enjoyed this chapter and you have learned many things from this. How to be wise, how to be powerful, how to use both the things together, how to balance both the things together. So, here we end with this chapter and I'll be back again with something new, something interesting. Bye-bye. Take care of yourself.